on the classroom doors, we will not talk about this election in this classroom. So that led me to further conversations, and my colleague Amy Anderson, who worked for Minnesota Civic Youth, worked with several people and came up with this protocol that they call respectful conversations in schools. One of the points that Amy, my headset, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's just starting to buzz and it's driving me crazy. One of the points that Amy had brought up to me is that oftentimes there are difficult conversations around driving, safe driving, that teens have to have with their parents, teens have to have with other teens, and how can we prepare our young people to have difficult conversations. So Amy thought just a high-level overview of one of the protocols that I am teaching to students and to young people and to teachers might be useful. Are there times in the work that you all are doing, Tracy and Mary, that it is difficult? There are times when there are difficult conversations?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example around driver safety?
I thought you meant just regular hard conversations.
That
Not
too.
so much, yeah. Well, we talk about sexual abuse among kids. We talk about suicide. We talk about all kinds of like life skills and social emotional learning. So those are tough conversations. Not so much when it comes to safe driving, because that we don't really touch upon that in our curriculum.
Okay. How about you, Mary?
Well, it's really hard for our kids because they do our laws. We have graduated licensing laws in Missouri, so some of my kids have certain privileges and others have other privileges depending on how long they've had their driver's license.
Okay.
So we can get in really heated discussions about, well, it's not fair that, you get to do that and you've had your license a month longer than I have, but that just, after you've had your license 6 months or a year, you turn over to the next level of driving. And one of the big things that we've discussed this year, and we've got into some really heated debates about, with our graduated licensing laws in Missouri, my high school kids believe that we should have graduated licensing laws for senior citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And so that becomes real touchy, especially when they want to invite our city council members, and because we really get with our city government when we talk about things. And some of our city council members are senior citizens. So that can be some touchy conversations that we have, but both sides are prepared to be honest but respectful. And so that's probably our biggest. It's not necessarily anything bad happening behind the wheel. It's just being proactive about who should have what privileges when they are behind the wheel.
Okay. So this first protocol that I will review with you might not have direct application, but I think there might be some things that you might be able, if you're facing difficult conversations or a controversial conversation, which I think graduated licensing for the elderly could be somewhat controversial. There might be some information that might be useful. I also want to honor that you're done here at 4:30, so I want to honor that as well. So this, as I mentioned, the respectful conversations in school really came out of a need to have conversations around issues that some of the teachers in the classrooms were not having. They were afraid. Actually, some of the teachers in my hometown were being accused of trying to indoctrinate students into a certain type of viewpoint. So one of the reasons that this conversation protocol came up was to have a structured conversation where kids can feel safe to explore to share how they feel about issues. The protocol starts with agreements, and we'll go over those in just a couple of minutes. But I was reminded of the importance of having, if you're going to have a difficult conversation, having a pre-conversation about the importance of norms, or these are the protocols, or these are the things that we are going to consider. I'll get to those in a little bit. Our protocol also discusses 3 questions. Our protocol is such that it is timed, so each person has a specific amount of time to talk. So these small groups of 5 to 6 students have 1 to 2 minutes to talk, and we have a little sand timer that we hand them when it's their turn to talk, and when it runs through, then they hand it to the next person. And we also are training our students to be the leaders of these conversations. So the student facilitator wouldn't be sharing their idea, but they're concentrating on everyone following the agreements. And it has been such a powerful way for young people to take ownership of a conversation, and for that peer-to-peer conversation to go in a much different way than if an adult is standing in the front of the room leading a conversation. So the agreements are pretty simple, but drawing those out and being mindful that this is what is expected in a conversation has been really useful. Not only because it reminds people to keep these things in the back of their mind, but we teach students how to respond if someone is breaking one of these agreements. Like the first one, speak for yourself, using I messages. I feel this, and I'm thinking this, rather than Susie said that, or my parents think that. Helping kids to develop a point of view. This whole protocol is not necessarily a debate. I think we do a pretty good job in our schools and in our out of school time programs teaching kids how to debate an issue. But this protocol is to help understand another perspective. So it's not about changing your mind, it's about understanding and being empathetic. So speaking for oneself is a really important tool or guideline to help kids remember to think for themselves and to have their own opinions. Practice respect. That's a pretty well, yeah, duh, as the kids would say, duh. But if someone is not practicing respect, that student leader can say, you know, Mary, let's keep your comments to yourself. Or this is a time for, Stacy, this is a time for us to listen and not to offer your opinion. So we're really giving kids those skills to for that student facilitator to interact and to draw some boundaries around it. Being brief. I bet we all have some of those kids who could go on and on and on and talk for hours, and then they don't allow for other people to voice their opinion. That's why that sand timer is a valuable tool. We're asking kids also to listen carefully. We often start with, if the topic is gun safety, we ask kids to think we ask kids to think for 30 seconds before they talk. And if you ask kids why we are giving them 30 seconds to think about this before they share their opinion, they go, well, sometimes we blurt. Sometimes we don't think about what we say. And boy, are there times I would like adults to do the same, to think before they open their mouth, right? Right, ladies?
Yeah.
Classic respect confidentiality. What happens in a respectful conversation stays in a respectful conversation. We also want to assure that people who don't want to share something, that it's okay if they pass. It is okay if they say that they're not ready to talk, but it's up to that student facilitator to come back and say, would you like to share at this point? So pass or pass for now. The one thing about this, I mentioned that there are 3 questions. So these are the 6 agreements. We have 3 questions. The first question is, what in your experience or background or values leads you to your feelings on blank? So we've had conversations about race. We've had conversations about the dress code. We've had conversations about the inequities between boys and girls and how they have to get ready for gym, because that was an important conversation to have. There were some girls in an 8th grade class where they felt they always had to change, but the boys didn't. That was really relevant. So we had a respectful conversation about that. Our protocol stays the same, but the topics change. So our first question is really about understanding where somebody is coming from. And that really can relate to when you're having a conversation between people who it might be a difficult scenario. If you're talking to the elders and saying that, well, we've observed that maybe some people in our senior community need to review their own driving habits. How do we tap into their feelings so we're not saying this is what we believe? We want to have kids understand a perspective. So that is something that really helps to frame a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
The second question we ask is, what are your hopes and fears about the topic? So what are your hopes and fears about race, racism, and white privilege? What are your hopes and concerns about, we had one conversation about snack. That sounds silly, but in a 5th grader's mind, that was a pretty important topic. So one girl who is Muslim talked about one of her concerns is that people didn't understand why she didn't eat gummy worms. She didn't have she didn't feel safe to share with other people that she doesn't eat gummy worms because they have gelatin, and gelatin comes from pork, from pigs. And so this was her opportunity in a safe space to share that conversation. So again, that is just one protocol. And I encourage people to have some of these difficult conversations, because this is where kids are going to learn how to navigate that. When I think about coaching peer-to-peer conversations and peer-to-adult conversations, these are the things that I pulled out from the protocol that I use. That whole agreement to norms and how you're going to structure the conversation, that has been very useful for young people and adults to agree that if we're going to have a tough conversation, let's make sure what our boundaries are. Can you think about, Stacy or Mary, can you think about a time where there has been a difficult conversation that the young people you're working with have had to navigate with adults or with peers?
This one is probably a little more informal, but when we travel, boys have a hard time sharing rooms, more so than girls do. And so the last time when we traveled for a trip recently, just an overnight one, it was the kids had to share rooms with students from other schools. And that the girls were like, it'll be okay. But the boys had a really hard time with that. And it was really hard for the girls to understand without the boys giving away too much of their personal feelings. And so we tiptoed through that, and I think everybody understood by the time we were finished. But yeah, I was sitting on the edge of my chair trying to figure out where this was going to go and how we were going to get there. But they muddled through, and we did fine. But with these kind of questions, and I actually use timers in my classroom with my middle schoolers when we do group work, because they can't all share the table time. Yeah. So I already used that tactic, but I haven't used it with my high schoolers. We just kind of go through, but maybe that's something that I should institute there. But we got it figured out, and everybody had an okay overnight trip, even though the boys were not. So
that's interesting.
I would think it's opposite.
Oh no, the boys, and I will just be blunt with you. The boys said that everybody knows what mood you wake up in the morning, because you can't hide that from other people. Where girls, nobody knows the difference.
That's true.
Oh, that is funny.
That was their real concern, that they might wake up and embarrass themselves because you don't know what state you might wake up in. And so, so that was their big issue. And I've traveled with boys enough over the years that they had just always said, I don't like to do that, but we never talked about it. But this time we had a 2-hour drive to get where we were headed. And so they were in the confines of a vehicle while they had this discussion. So and I was driving, so my input was limited.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Stacy, were you gonna share something?
I actually forgot what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
No,
I understand that.
happens to me a lot.
You just said your girls have more of a problem than the boys.
I just found that funny. I thought that girls would have a harder time like rooming with strangers. I don't know.
Hi,
Hi, Rosemary.
Hi, Rosemary. My name is Julie Bascom.
Hi, Julie Bascom. I'm a little slow because I had another grant meeting at the same time.
Well, I think we're all doing those balls, juggling those balls, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about conversations, difficult conversations. I'm wondering from you all, I'm thinking, Mary, when you're in the van, do you find that you have to, how do you navigate those conversations? Are you a listener? Do you have to guide it? Are there?
For the group I actually took with me, I have these kids in a leadership class. So we start out our school year with seven habits of highly effective teens.
Yeah.
So we already kind of know how we need to treat others and how we talk to people. And so we kind of have that foundation rather than I just put a random group of kids in a van and take off. So these are kids who've worked on projects together. They're juniors and seniors, so they've been in my class, some of them this will be their 3rd year if they're seniors, if they choose to take my leadership class that long. So I think I have the benefit of they know each other well enough that even though it's a mixed group, they're not all like from the same clique or anything like that, but they know the lines. And I am a true believer that you have to know where the lines are before you can ask a kid, why did you cross that line?
Yes.
So we have really good lines drawn as far as how we talk to each other and what we can say to each other in respectful ways. And so that's a huge thing because we're out in the community a lot and they need to know that respect for themselves and others everywhere they're at, not just in the van. So,
We're having some really constructive conversation because we've had in the last 90 days at a minimum of 20 individuals killed in automobile accidents because of their not wearing seat belts. And today there was a conviction. The grand jury took a woman who was driving drunk with her children in the car, not in seat belts, and they all were killed. The grand jury has indicted her on 11 counts. So there's lots of discussion about this whole thing with our kids. And they're taking it very seriously.
So, Rosemary, in regard to those kind of, is there ever, are most kids agreeing that seatbelts should be worn, or are you having conversations about, for kids trying to change other people's minds?
Oh, they're definitely into wearing, the kids in my program are definitely into wearing seatbelts. There's not even a discussion about that. In fact, they monitor each other, making sure everybody's got theirs on. The only place we have a real difficulty is the school has those stupid minibuses, which have seatbelts, but the coaches do not force anyone to wear them. Only there's those of us that are doing driving safety are saying, yeah, you have to wear them, but and in that point there's fighting over it, but not in vehicles that are cars or that kind of thing. With my kids, however, when we did the seatbelt survey of kids wearing seatbelts going in and out of the campus, we have a campus of 900 students and about 90-ish faculty member. We were appalled at the number of people not wearing seatbelts.
Yeah.
And it's pretty scary.
So how would your group of students that are involved in this, how would they approach an adult who's not wearing a seatbelt?
Well, we have a great partnership with the state police, and they came and did the first survey with us and stood there in uniform, people going out the gate. The second time they went out, and we just raised our hand of people that we thought were going out without seatbelts, and they stopped and gave everybody a warning. And it was huge. It made a huge impact when we did the third survey.
Interesting. Interesting.
And, you know, sometimes you have to use the hammer. I mean, you know, our kids are very respectful when they talk to people. We do morning announcements. Our kids in the community that are not school-based do a lot of education with posters and social media and stuff like that. But sometimes it doesn't matter how much you talk. If somebody's got in their mind that they're not going to wear their seatbelt, especially adults. And the area that we're seeing it in is the area that's about the ages that are about 25 to 40. That's seeing the least wearing. So.
When we do our seatbelt checks, the staff members will, when the kids are out there, they'll always say, "Don't tell Cummings I didn't have my seatbelt on." So they know it's important, and they're like the kids, "Don't tell on me." But our district this year, or for next year, we're going to have a seatbelt policy in our student handbook. If you want to park in our parking lots, there's a policy in place. And when we do seatbelt checks, they're going to allow us to give out tickets. And the ticket is, you have to come to our advisory on a certain date, and we're going to talk with you about the importance of seatbelts and why you're not wearing them. So we're giving some information rather than just saying you need to wear your seatbelt. So
and you're
during
lucky.
the school day, so it
got some cooperation with the administration at the school. We have some people at the administration of the school that are not as collaborative.
We're very lucky.
They think that they think, you know, that this is another thing, you know, we need to do.
Well, in doing some wrap up right now, I think some of the conversation that I've been having might not be so relevant to where you're at right now. But if your students are ever in a position where they're trying to one-on-one or have a conversation with somebody who doesn't want to wear their seatbelt, then these are things, these 4 steps are actually something I got from what is this woman's name? Her name is Judy Ringer, and it's a step-by-step checklist for how to have a difficult conversation. Great article. She's got some sentence beginning conversation stems like, "I'd like to talk to you about, I'd like to talk about wearing your seatbelt with you. But first, I'd like to get your point of view." Boy, what a great way to start a conversation rather than "you should be wearing your seatbelt." Just getting their point of view. I need your help with what just happened. You think you have a few minutes to talk? I have found that even with adults, I used to teach adults how to do fundraising on the phone. Man, we need scripts. We need something actually to say. So if you're working with your young people about how to have these kind of conversations when they might be difficult, I encourage you to take a look at that. It's 4 pages of a step-by-step checklist for difficult conversations. It might be something that's useful. You all are doing such important and good work. I really applaud the work that you're doing through Project Ignition and through Campfire and through your program. It's really, it's important, and I feel more called to this work than ever.
Julie, where is that? Where is the reference for that article?
That reference is judyringer.com,